What's up guys, this is Desm101, welcome back to the channel. Alright, today we're going to jump right into a comparison of some handheld systems that I own, and we'll go ahead and get started with an introduction to each. Now this is the PS Vita, the most recent handheld from Sony. Now this system comes with a 5-inch OLED screen at 960 by 544 pixels. It utilizes proprietary memory cards, which are overpriced and hard to find. And it utilizes a cartridge-based system where you slide in the game cards there. You can also hack it and put in an adapter to use SD card media. You can see here I have a form factor enhancing case on it that makes it a little easier to carry and press on the shoulder buttons there. And it has solid controls overall. The next one is the iconic 3DS. This is the 3DS XL. So I've had a 3DS since the original version came out, but I picked up this one and it's been adequate for me. Uses a touchscreen display, and on 3DS it's 4.8-inch TN panels at 800 by 240 pixels each, and it utilizes a nub for the 3D movement as well as a D-pad and 4 face buttons, 2 L and R triggers, as well as a 3D slider that makes it unique compared to all the other systems here. Next up is the PSP Go, which is an interesting, extremely portable version of the PSP. It doesn't have any kind of physical media drive, so no UMD discs will work on this. You're basically supposed to only download onto this device. It's pretty interesting. The controls slide out from underneath the screen there, and you have an analog nub similar to the 3DS, as well as a D-pad and 4 face buttons, 2 shoulder buttons. And last, here's the JXD s7800B, an interesting Chinese console that's an Android machine. It has expandable memory there, utilizes dual analog sticks, a D-pad, 4 face buttons, as well as a few other menu buttons, and 4 shoulder buttons. One interesting thing about this is that it has HDMI output, as well as it utilizes a different type of charger than most tablets. Pretty interesting design. It actually resembles the Nintendo Switch that we have now. This came out in about 2013, 2014, I believe. Pretty interesting device. Alright, now that we've had an introduction to each one, let's take a closer look, starting with the 3DS. I assume most people are familiar with the 3DS, a pretty amazing handheld system that's really kept Nintendo afloat and relevant for the last few years, and been quite a monster of a handheld. This is the 30th anniversary Luigi edition of the 3DS XL. It comes with a free download for Mario and Luigi Bowser Inside Story, I think. And one benefit of Nintendo consoles is you can have access to a lot of different varieties of accessories, like this case here. Has a great graphic print of Mario on it. Some neat details, like the logo there. Let's look at some games. Retro Game Challenge, one I talked about previously. Ninja Gaiden, a great DS game that uses touch controls. Surprisingly good. How about Metroid Pinball? I never get tired of that game. And Contra 4, a must-have for the Nintendo DS. But let's not forget the regular 3DS games too. Kid Icarus, the Sega 3D Classics. So many must-have titles for this system make it really a great system to have. Link Between Worlds, Metroid. The list just goes on and on with this system. And if you got it early enough, you were privileged to get into the Ambassador program, which you can see here. And the benefit of that was that they gave you a bunch of free games, like Game Boy Advance games. And they did this because when the 3DS first came out, it was pretty expensive, and it didn't sell too well because I'm guessing a lot of the games that were available weren't super popular. And so I was really happy to be able to take part in that, and show off some of these cool Game Boy Advance games. The screens look pretty good. One of the downsides with 3DS is you can't really capture it without some kind of modifications or a special dev kit or a press kit kind of device. So the panels and the screens are pretty good here. Definitely adequate for gaming for long sessions. Next, let's take a look at the PlayStation Vita. This is a pretty amazing handheld here. You can see that we've got a couple different cases available. One of the neat things about the system is that it has a touchscreen as well, but it also has a touchscreen on the back, which isn't really very useful in my opinion. And in games where you utilize that, or the camera, it's actually caused more problems than what you might think. So you can see this case leaves the buttons recessed in there a little bit. Keeps it in that original shape and form factor, which for myself is a little bit cramped to use sometimes, hence why I got the other one. Now, one problem with the PlayStation Vita is the library. It's definitely not for everyone. There are some really good titles, some standout AAA games, Gravity Rush, Killzone Mercenary, those are some titles that come to mind. But overall, I think the benefit to owning a PlayStation Vita in 2019 is to have access to the homebrew scene and, of course, hacking the system. So that really unlocks the full potential of the PlayStation Vita, in my opinion. And what really gives it an edge currently. But of course, we can't just discredit the games. We can take a look at some of the good ones here that I really like. Ys has some good releases on the Vita. Persona 4, Wipeout, Metal Gear HD Collection, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Rayman Legends. Definitely some good games to choose from, but it was hampered by things like these memory cards, which are full of games, by the way, but they fill up so quick and they're way too expensive. It really just makes the system kind of a drag, especially when you think about how to manage those cards and the possibility of losing them. There's a decent little case there. Alright, next let's talk about the PSP Go. So I actually did have a regular PSP, and I accidentally put it in with the laundry and it got washed. It still worked, but the disk drive didn't work after that, so I actually picked up one of these. And I've been pretty happy with it over the years. It's been providing a lot of gaming for me, and it's an interesting device to use. There's some cool features for it. So some of the specs on the PSP Go are, it's got a 3.8-inch TFT LCD at 480 by 272 pixels. People often talk about how easy it is to hack this device. I haven't actually hacked this one here. It's all stock with games from the PlayStation Store. Here is where you put in the memory cards, which were definitely not as expensive as the ones for the Vita. A bit more easy to get access to for larger sizes. One of the really cool features is that you can pair it via Bluetooth with one of your PS3 controllers. You can do this, the easiest way to do it is using a PS3, that's how I paired it. So every time the PS3 controller wakes up, it'll look for the PSP. Automatically pair with it. So you can see when that light is constant, that means that it's connected. So it's a really fun way to play the system. I've seen some people get a kind of handle for it, or a holder that will basically mount it to the top of your PS3 controller. Works well. Some of the games that I have on here, Maverick Hunter X, Final Fantasy IV, Pac-Man Champion Edition. So PSP definitely has one of the best portable gaming libraries, in my opinion, in just terms of sheer numbers and quality. So when you get one of these now, if you're looking at one, I wouldn't really know the best approach to go getting games onto the system, because there are a lot of titles that were released for PSP that aren't on the download store. So it's kind of a tricky way to recommend how to, load it up with games. So you can see here there is quite a few titles that I enjoy, a lot of Silent Hill games. I'm a huge fan of those. And this was a very fun system to play Silent Hill Origins on.
Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
So speaking of accessories too, one thing I want to mention is that you can actually send output through this device using the charger port, which isn't the best way since you can't charge it and it runs out a little bit fast. But I have here a component cable. So what I'll do is I will send the signal from there through the component into the OSSC and check out the video running in pass-through mode. Here's the actual captured footage coming out from the OSSC by a component. You can actually make sure that it's set for progressive picture type. When you change the TV type to 16:9, it really just ups the resolution on the top and bottom. It doesn't really, you have to use the wide mode on the TV settings. So it still looks like smashed if you're running it through something like this, like an upscaler. And you can see here from the menu, the XMB, it's pretty large type of resolution, but when you run a game, you can tell it runs on a screen about that size there. What I've done is blown it up a little bit, zoomed in, so you can see the picture and get an idea of the picture quality. So overall, this is a pretty fun way to play the system. I've been playing it primarily in this mode now, since I've been probably handheld gaming on the 3DS a bit more, or the PlayStation Vita. But it's really interesting to test out the video output and kind of see, the picture quality and see how it looks. One thing to note is, the better quality of component cables that you get for this kind of output, the better quality you'll get on the display. So these aren't the best component cables. I think I kind of messed up there. I should have invested in something a bit more high-end as far as the component cables. These are kind of cheap component cables, which isn't going to give you the best possible quality picture. Let's check out Dexter Neo. This is a old school update to a very old PC game. So it's got those 3.5D graphics and some pretty cool gameplay. I think it looks quite good on here. I like the design in this game. You can make out the details fairly well, and it does look really good on a large display. Alright, that moves us right along to the JXD s7800B. That's quite a mouthful, and the system was kind of a big deal when it came out back in around 2014. It definitely looks quite impressive. Nowadays, it's not so much of a wow factor, especially with something like the Nintendo Switch out, which outclasses it in so many ways. And as far as Android tablets go, another really popular one is the NVIDIA Shield, which is quite a bit more powerful than this. But this was a really interesting device for its time, and still kind of is a big curiosity. You can see here some of the outputs I was talking about. The USB port is for file transfers, and you actually have to power it through that barrel connection. You got a headphone port as well as HDMI. We'll check that out here in just a sec. So yeah, back to what I mentioned earlier, the build quality is just not all the way there. Even some things now, the Android firmware is not able to be updated anymore, so there are some compatibility issues. We'll check out a few games running in MAME. So overall, the MAME library is pretty good, and once you load up some arcade games on here and look at the screen, you would be pretty amazed, as I have been. And I still think this screen is just the most impressive thing about this system. It's definitely kind of the reason why you buy it. I noticed JXD doesn't have this on their site anymore, but I think there are some third-party sellers that are still selling it. That screen is a 7-inch IPS LCD at 1280 by 800 pixels. And for retro gaming, it really is a joy to look at. Now let's take a look at the HDMI output and see the quality. First, we'll start with some more MAME action and a couple MAME titles. First, starting with Defender. A pretty familiar game to most people, I think. So one of the benefits of gaming on an Android device is that you have access to lots of emulators and a variety of them. You can really kind of tweak them and get them to the functionality that you want them to have. But since this is an older device, you might run into some issues here and there, like I have. But overall, when I game on this thing, I'm going to play MAME. And even running it on the TV, it looks really great. Not 100% accuracy with the games, but still, when you have a good title running and you're right in the middle of it, it's a pretty fun system. Let's take a look at a native Android application. This is Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse. So this is a very nice example of the type of quality that you can get out of a native Android system or game that's running on the system.
As Mickey surveyed this new world, he noticed colossal storm clouds gathering in the skies. Hopefully the rain would hold off long enough for him to make it back to the castle.
So yeah, I still am pretty amazed at how nice this game looks. How about some N64 emulation? Yes, you can get it working on a device like this. While the compatibility with titles is definitely quite limited, you can see it is able to run and somewhat playable. Lots of frames kind of skipping and a bit of stuttering and whatnot here and there. But still, it's running. And it actually runs it in a higher resolution too, so. This emulator is Tendo 64. Alright, so now to go ahead and wrap this all up, let's take a look at what my picks are and recommendations of these 4 consoles. So what did I think? Well, the one at the very bottom is going to go ahead and probably have to be the JXD. Now, this is a pretty interesting console and definitely fun to play and check out, but the novelty wears off quick once you start having issues with the really gummy, kind of mushy D-pad and controls, as well as the battery. So my battery had tons of issues, and actually I lost the NAND flash when the battery died one time. So I've been looking at replacing the battery. There's a forum in Dingoodity that talks about this. So overall, the system, fun to check out, but for long gaming sessions and over a long period of time, it just hasn't held up for me. That means coming at number 3 is the PSP Go. Now this has been a very faithful and endearing system for me to use over the years, and I have very few complaints. I was probably a bit more attached to my original PSP, but still, mostly the games and the quality of the buttons are really some of the things that stuck with me. So you're getting nice consistent experience on here. Alright, and for me, runner-up has to be the 3DS. This was a really tough choice, and not really any digs against the 3DS. It is quite an amazing and impressive system, like I mentioned before. All the games on here, and just all the years that I've had with this system, from the earliest models to the XL version, it's pretty good. Really, the only stuff that kind of let me down is that they released an other version that has games that will only work on it, like the 3DS New. And that leaves us with the PlayStation Vita for my selection out of these handhelds. Now, it's just my personal preference, but I really like this system. The way that it feels in your hands, the way that it plays is pretty consistent. And the amount of emulators and homebrews they're able to bring to the table with this system are just astounding. So pair that with the screen and the library of games, you know, the PS1 titles, PSP titles, they can all run on here seamlessly pretty much, as well as all your emulators and old school games, homebrew. This is the one for me. So keep in mind, that's the only reason I chose this is because of the way it's hacked. So maybe if I had hacked my 3DS, I might have a different opinion. But as you saw, it's stock and this one is hacked, but it just became a real eye-opening experience for me to go ahead and have it updated like this. Alright, thanks guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope you have a good one.